Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew, Keith Johnson,
The Earth year is 2024, but what is the star date?
Alan Seiler,
Hi, everybody.
and Veronica Dashel.
Sup.
And this is our first episode of 2024.
Woohoo!
So,
Ooh,
yeah, we thought it'd be fun to count off our favorite Star Trek episodes of 2023. We had a pretty incredible year of Star Trek over
Yeah,
the
we
last
did.
year.
Yeah, we did.
I think all the shows that are running had, they're knocking it out of the park with their episodes. So we're going to start off with all of our number fives and count up to our number one episodes for 2023. So I guess I will start it off, and I'll say my number 5 favorite episode of 2023 was Those Old Scientists from Strange New Worlds.
That's right.
Yes.
And
That was so good.
I said this on our episode, but I thought that it did a great job of being a good episode of both shows, and you don't
Mhm.
always get that with crossover episodes.
Right.
I thought it was a lot of fun. They did a great job, and I thought that the actors did a great job of playing their characters in live action. Which, I mean, they had to go back and reference their mannerisms and stuff because they don't perform their own mannerisms on the
Yeah.
show. They're animated by the animator. So I just thought it was a great episode. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was just a fun Star Trek.
All right, Veronica, what's your number 5?
So my number 5 was The Last Generation.
Ooh.
ooh,
We
that
went
may
and
come
saw
up
that.
again.
Yeah, we went and saw that in the theaters. So it was a lot of
Ah,
extra fun to see that with a bunch of other fans and being all excited. And I mean, it wasn't like a great, amazing episode, but it was fun.
Mm.
That's what you'll see of most of mine. They're not great, amazing episodes. They're fun.
Hey, whatever criteria you choose to pick your episodes is all you, baby.
But it also has meaning because, as you say, the first episode of something and the last episode of something sometimes have their own built-in significance,
Mhm.
as that does. And as everybody knows, and there are detractors who say it's too much of a fan service, but Terry Matalas really, really, really wanted them to have a good send-off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he
And they
felt the
did.
movie was, what was the last? The last movie was Nemesis.
Right.
And
Ugh.
he didn't like that as their send-off. So he wanted to do right by him. And I think he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Keith, what was your number 5 episode?
My number 5 was 17 Seconds
Mm.
from Picard. And for those who don't remember, gosh, this is a horrible description, but the actual online description is Picard grapples with a life-altering revolution while the Titan and crew try to outmaneuver Vedic. In the meanwhile, Raffi and Worf uncover a nefarious plot. What I like about that is Raffi, as I said many times, was not my favorite character. I had personal issues for her portrayal in the first 2 seasons. And Worf has always been used a certain way, but I remember reading that Michael Dorn had a huge problem when they told him they wanted Worf to have white hair because he didn't want to look old. And the two of them in that episode, not only were they both used effectively, but they are damn good in this series. And then
Yeah.
they work well together.
So well
And
together.
yes, and all of Raffi's backstory works in this 3rd season. She has true character growth. And at the same time, while that's going on, you have this cat and mouse with Vedic, who I personally think the actress Amanda Plummer might have been a little over the top. But the dynamics between Picard and Riker are great. They also have shown character growth and change. They have to find trust in each other again. There's a question for a moment if Picard actually has the stuff to command again. It's just a really great episode that breaks a little bit of the TNG staid mold that the series had done. And I love it for that.
Awesome. All
Nice.
right, Alan, what's your number 5?
Okay. Moopsie.
Oh.
And I really debated my Lower Decks pick because, and I just want to say that we had 3 series that had a season this year, and
Mhm.
there was not a single episode that I disliked.
Yeah.
So this was not only a strong year for Star Trek, but at the same time, it was really difficult to pick, to narrow down to a top 5. There were a few that were like unquestionably top 5s, but
Right.
there was some that I really had to debate about. And so I went with Moopsie because I watched it very recently with my partner, and really enjoyed it. I mean, it's such a fun episode. And like Veronica said, this one I picked mainly for the fun factor. There were some other ones that came super close to occupying this number 5 spot. But in the end, Moopsie took it. So there you go.
Nice.
And a quick behind the scenes, guys, when we were talking offline, I was saying, did anybody have thoughts about their favorite series of the year? And Alan said, I really don't have a favorite series of the year because all are excellent. So that is a thing. That's an amazing thing to be able to say.
Right on.
Yeah. Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I was just going to get a couple of comments. Elaine says, pretty graphics. Thank you very much.
Yay. So if you're just listening, you should come watch the YouTube video of these awesome graphics Alan made.
And Matt says, cook. We'll see. We'll see how the job descriptions evolve over the course of this show. So
yeah, I was gonna say I really debated putting this list together whether it was going to be my favorite episodes or what I thought were the best episodes, which aren't always the same thing.
Exactly
right.
Yeah. So I did sort of a combination of the two.
Yeah.
So my number 4 episode is Under the Cloak of War. From Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
That may come up again.
Yes.
Spoilers.
It'd be interesting to see how many of these episodes appear on multiple places on different lists. But Under the Cloak of War, I felt like it was a return to like DS9 level storytelling for Star Trek, which is tough to do because DS9 built it up over time. You know, I mean, Strange New Worlds they only have 20 episodes out so far. For us to get to know these characters. And I think what holds me back from it being higher on the list is the ending isn't particularly Trekkie, and I go back and forth about the ending, about whether I mean, you can't just kill someone at work and then fly off to the next adventure. Whether your coworker said it was that ambassador started the fight or not, there's going to be like a trial and stuff. I know they can't do another trial episode, but I felt like that was a little too episodic there at the end, and I wish that he would have worked through his issues in a different way. But I mean, it was a very powerful episode, and I love that they tied back in with the Discovery Klingon War, because I just like when the shows reference one another.
Absolutely.
I love sometimes the most mundane seeming statements are powerful. You just can't kill someone at work. I love that.
It's funny. That's how the world works, though, man. But I, when we talked about this, when we did our show the week that it aired, I was saying that Dr. Mbenga was one that in the first season, I just never really developed a connection to, and I didn't really find, that much depth into him. And I liked him, and I was really excited about him being on the show and seeing where he would go. I never expected it to go here. So I feel like in season 2 was Mbenga's year. And they did such good stuff with him, and I loved the character in a whole new way in season 2.
Right. Yeah. All right, Veronica, what's your number 4?
So my number 4 is Something Borrowed, Something Green from Lower Decks. Yes, I really like how they fleshed out the Orions, because a lot of the other series have fleshed out various aliens that we have seen before but hadn't really been fleshed out. So I was really enjoying this type of fleshing out of the Orions and being able to see that, hey, this is kind of the traditional publicly known Orions, but also still getting a little bit of that, oh, hey, here's how Tendi grew up and why she changed and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that one was on again, off again on my list because I really enjoyed that. And it's doing what you should do for a Star Trek is, take a character, a race from Star Trek and make that one of those race, part of your main crew, and then flesh them out, see their world. And I love that they're doing that with the Orions after all this time.
Finally.
Yeah. All right, Keith, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is Imposters.
Ooh.
Obviously, I don't think I have recency bias, but but again, what I liked about it, and I'm fleshing this out because we're making good time. So many people talk about the first 2 seasons of Picard, which I pretty much don't like and don't, I don't intend to revisit. And one of the things Patrick Stewart said was he wanted to come back for a reason. He wanted to tell a story that made sense. He didn't just want to be Captain Picard again or Admiral Picard. And Foster's continues this trend of showing these people in both the same and a different light. And in this case, this is where the thing that you're used to for every Star Trek show, the hero comes in, bluffs their way through something. Kirk said in the movie, pats themselves on the back for their cleverness, doesn't work. And this is where the captain, who I didn't like at first, of the Titan, basically calls them on, excuse my language, they're bullshit. And
Yep.
You keep coming here because you're all these legends and basically, mess around with me. Well, this is not going to happen. And in this episode, the captain even gleefully talks about not looking forward to maybe their court martial and what happened to them. And again, it just shows, it kind of almost deconstructs the myth of the Star Trek hero, the legend. Of course, at the end of the series, as Veronica pointed out with her thing, it does that again. Of course, the great hero is going to save the day, but it also shows this old poem called Golden Boy with feet of clay. They have feet of clay. And I love that. And I love the fact that Picard and Riker can't use their charm and their wit and their history to basically snow somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Spoilers for those who haven't seen it yet. And 2 words for this show, Rolaren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were some really powerful scenes between her and Captain Picard, which
Mhm.
frankly, I mean, she left the show when I was like 12. I never expected to see Rolaren again and have
Me
direct
either.
resolution to those episodes.
Right.
So I thought it was fantastic too.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I think modern Trek is doing so superbly is bringing back some of these characters and giving them a whole new resolution, a whole new gravitas, or in
Yeah.
Doctor Who terms, mavitas.
And one real quick spoiler I heard not just from fans, but even from Terry Matalas himself, is you can't be sure, this is a huge spoiler, you can't be sure that Rolaren is dead. And I heard Terry Matalas, now some people may say that's cheap, but I also remember we talked about Picard is they seem to have a habit of bringing back characters and killing them off real quick. So I wouldn't be mad if they found a way for her to have survived. So if you want to give me some gobbledygook that she beamed out the last second, hey, I'm all for it.
Right.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right,
Right.
Alan, number 4.
Okay. What is my number 4? Oh, yeah, I remember now. My number 4 is, I think, the first one of the repeats that we've had, and that is The Last Generation.
Yeah.
And
Yay!
I'm just going to say that I was super excited about Picard season 3, mainly because of the reunion of the Next Gen cast. And, I like good storytelling, but I also am a sucker for nostalgia. And this final episode was such a nostalgia fest. And all it did, the second half of the prior episode and this entire episode was nothing but like a Next Generation greatest hits. And that's all I wanted from it. And I felt like it delivered it in such a great and exciting way. And it did things in a way that could not have been done on Next Generation. You saw the ship in action and the crew in a way that you would never have seen them depicted on Next Generation. And I felt like it really, it did everything that I was hoping it would have done. Give a big hero moment for the clunky old ship pulled out of mothballs from the museum and soaring into the rescue. And man, I loved it so much. And this one is definitely one of the ones that made it onto the list simply for the fun factor.
Right.
But it's nostalgia, but it was nostalgia done really well.
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate reason. It's just for that it's fun. I mean, it's art and entertainment.
Yeah. Exactly. It looked beautiful. It was well paced. It was filmed well. The actors were spectacular. Everything about it was just a big win. And after a couple of seasons of Picard that maybe were a little iffy, they would get started really well, and then it would just lose me halfway.
Right.
This one kept me going the entire season and delivered in the biggest damn way it could have at the end.
Mhm.
And it did everything I hoped it would do. So big win for me.
And I guess I'll pause between each set of numbers, I guess, to see if we want to touch on any comments or anything like that. If you, I saw that there's a few folks had some few.
Yeah, because we're making good time. At this rate,
We are making surprisingly good time.
in half an hour.
Let's see. Matt Sweatman says Enterprise has the most chill HR department imaginable. I don't know what that means or what that's in reference to.
That was probably in Benga.
Yeah, when Mega murdered that ambassador.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me just explain. He said HR. I was thinking PR.
Oh.
So it made no sense to me. But now that I know we're talking about HR, I totally understand.
Did he even
And
get a
then
write-up for
we have a Facebook user, Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, so much more on Orions now.
that? Absolutely.
And
doing
that's
them
when,
right,
you know,
that's-
every time we've gotten a new Star Trek series, it always felt like each series adopted one of the established
Mhm.
races and really developed them in a big way. And I think the Orions are really benefiting from the modern Trek era.
Mhm.
Yeah, and on Next Gen, they had a bias against using Tellarites and Andorians and Orions. And
Yeah,
I mean, even Vulcans were few and far between on Next Gen.
Right.
definitely.
But
definitely.
it was Enterprise that got that started again, going back to those races, and the new shows have embraced it.
Yeah.
All right. My number 3 is Ad Astra per Aspera.
Ooh,
which-
baby. Hang on, let me find. There you are.
I thought it was just a
Ooh.
fantastic episode. I mean, great. It's using courtroom drama to, tell a social justice story. You know,
Yeah.
it's using the space metaphor for things that are going on in the world, and also fleshing out number one's character.
Yeah.
It would have been higher on the list, but there was an awful lot of that episode that was the crew members watching Star Trek on TV, which I would like to. And we talked about this a little in our courtroom episode. I mean, I wouldn't have preferred for like Pike to be a lawyer and number one to be, for Spock to be a lawyer, etc. But I wish they could have been more involved through the meat of the story. Although I did
Yeah.
feel like there was a fantastic guest star, and she did a great job as the lawyer who was defending Una.
Yeah.
And of course, she has a personal history with her because opposing counsel is still the captain's girlfriend, because you can't get away from that in Starfleet.
No.
Starfleet, they're
Of
going to find
course.
your friends, relatives, and ex-girlfriends to be on the courtroom.
Exactly. That was almost the trekkiest thing about the whole episode.
Right. They also had some really nice updating of stuff from like the 23rd century, like courtroom, like court martial, and also a beautiful redress of that Starfleet command facility from Discovery, where they turned it into a courtroom with a big mural. And I just thought it was really, really well done.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now, I
All
know
right.
a couple of us are going to have more to say about that one a little bit later in our show. So
Yeah.
stay
we'll have
tuned.
We should have some time at the end to circle back on some of these.
Yeah, one thing I'll comment real quick on what you said, Charles. I think you called out something very cool, which is, and people talk about this in the real world. In Star Trek, the trope is they always grab one of the commanding officers and sometimes force them to become a lawyer. And I know people say that doesn't happen in the real world. Like, they wouldn't grab the chief of staff from the army and say, you got to go defend this private. And so I agree with you. It was kind of cool that they honestly let lawyers do the lawyering as they should in the show.
If I'm ever accused of a crime and my boss is my attorney and my ex-girlfriend is the judge, just throw away the key.
This is great. So Charles, this is great. So Charles has been arrested for killing a coworker, and now his boss defends him.
Right.
Great.
Oh goodness.
All right, Veronica, number 3.
So number 3 is Parth Ferengi Heart Place.
Oh
Right.
yeah, we knew we were gonna be a Ferengi.
What did I mess up?
No, go ahead.
What did I mess up? What?
You didn't make it plural. I mean, possessive. Parth
Okay.
Ferengi's heart place.
Okay.
It's okay. No big deal. Carry on.
Whatever. That's what I had written down. So whatever.
Just say Moopsie, Veronica. It covers everything.
No, but obviously Ferengi episode. But I also really enjoyed how they played up that Tendi and Rutherford relationship. and how everyone's like, oh, they're in a relationship, they really love each other, and then they did this thing and they're like, yeah, this doesn't really work for us, let's just go back to being friends. Ha ha ha, let's jump in this tube together and we're gonna be on top of each other. Ha ha ha, this is so normal, this isn't what friends do. And then Mariner's whole storyline that was going on, which came to a conclusion at the end of the series. This is kind of where I really saw it kind of kicking off.
Yeah.
And I forget, Veronica, we talked about that. Where did you land on whether they should stay friends or have a love relationship?
I don't remember where I was then, but I'm pretty sure I'm friends.
Okay. Depending on the
friends now.
day, I have a different opinion depending on the day.
Okay.
This is another one that was on my list, then off my list, then on my list, then off my
Yeah.
list as I was putting it together.
Yeah, it was definitely one that I considered as well.
Yeah. All right, Keith, number 3.
Okay, finally getting off of Picard, the inner fight.
Okay.
Ooh.
And that is, at the end of the day, when all this is said and done, and we do a retrospective of all the new, well, this is not the new track, the newest track. I don't know if Prodigy or Lower Decks will come off as my biggest surprise, because I didn't have doubts about Lower Deck. Lower Decks, I didn't expect it to be as good as it turned out to be. I'd never seen the creators work before. I just seen pictures. I knew nothing about these guys. And Lower Decks, I think I mentioned it first. I couldn't stand the characters. Well, not all the time, but sometimes her character would get on my nerves because she would talk back to her mom, and it seemed like they were playing up a little bit of the humor of her being this irreverent officer. But again, they've done that word that I'm going to overuse. They've shown character growth.
Yeah.
Which I did not expect. I mean, they could have, as some people who don't watch the show think they are doing, stayed in a slapstick show and just told jokes every week. They're not doing that.
Right.
They're doing character growth. And this show also, again, we've talked about, this show is not even an hour, and they pack in so much good stuff. There's the thing on with repairing the satellite. There's this thing with her mother and them basically kind of going undercover, and her mother showing her skills outside of just being a starship captain. There's the whole thing on the planet. There's the whole thing with the fighting the Klingon and the Cardassians and the bonding between her and the Klingon. There is a lot going on. And then the mystery is deepening. As you said, Veronica, we'll find out what's going on with her toward the end of the series or the season. But there's that going on with her. There's the things going on. And it really honestly feels like a live action show with all these scene changes. And I am just blown away by the writing in this series. Just absolutely blown away.
Yeah.
Can't argue there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And somehow I'm missing a graphic. So
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry I don't have one to show for Keith's number 3 pick.
We'll act it out.
Yes. Keith, if you'll just write it on the screen.
All right. Alan, number 3.
Number 3. Hang on.
We
I
need
don't
that
remember.
dude. We need that dude from Dave Letterman. Remember they would call
The
out
dude-
somebody. The guy he'd call out his top win, and that guy would repeat the number with that great voice.
Oh. Well, my number 3 is another repeat, and it is Those Old Scientists.
Yay!
This was the one that I was most excited for. You know,
Yes.
loving the first season of Strange New Worlds the way that I did, and being such a huge fan of Lower Decks. When they announced that there would be a crossover between those two shows, I lost my mind. I couldn't, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see it. I didn't know how they were going to pull it off. I didn't know if the two crossover characters would remain animated throughout the live action episode. I thought that would have been a cool approach. I think that was sort of maybe what I was expecting them to do. Having them translate into a live action setting as live action characters was almost better.
Yes.
And I say that because the two actors who are, you know, mainly do their characters in a recording booth. They just come in and they read a script, and they read the script basically for the season. I mean, they do it very quickly. And now they're they're basically embodying their characters for the first time. And I was so excited, first of all, for them to get the opportunity to do that, you know, because I think there are there's sort of maybe a subsection that maybe considers Lower Decks to be not legit Trek
Right.
because it's an animated show, because it's a cartoon. And I felt like this maybe lent some legitimacy
Mhm.
to it by bringing these characters into a quote unquote legit live action show. And that they sold it as well as they did, and that they were true to their characters. I just thought it was great. But then it was also just a really good episode. You know, it was a
Yeah.
fun show that delivered on all the bases that it promised, and I thought it was an incredibly successful carryover from one to another, and
Mhm.
it
Yes.
totally embraced all the uniqueness and all the specialness of both shows.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
All right. You want to grab a comment real quick?
Let's see. Matt Sweatman says that Charles should have a puppet as a lawyer.
Indeed.
Does he mean you should have a lawyer puppet, or a puppet that's a lawyer, or
I'll take one of my puppets over my boss if I'm going into court to fight for my life.
We'll take the Spock puppet. Thank you very much.
Right. All right. Well, let's take a quick break to go to a commercial, and then when we come back, we'll count down our number 2 and number 1 episodes of 2023. So stay right there.
Attention, people of Earth!
Turned on the TV late last night.
Cause I felt nerdy.
Save the galaxy from a fright.
Cause I felt nerdy. Turned on my TV late last night. Cause I felt nerdy. Defied gravity and took flight. Cause I felt nerdy.
Exterminate, exterminate, seek, locate, destroy.
I have to go. Having some problems up here. Good luck, stay safe, see you soon.
And thank you to Matt
Sorry.
for that nice segue into the commercial break.
I was going to play a second one and it didn't activate.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll save it.
Okay. All right. So let's kick it off with number 2, my number 2 episode. And I cheated a little bit.
Ooh, cheater.
Yep. Because I counted the 2-part finale of Lower Decks as an episode. So
Right
it's
on.
the Inner Fight / Old Friends, New Planets.
Yeah, baby.
I was rewatching these over the holidays. And I was just thinking, like, they can't figure out how to do a Star Trek movie. Just get Mike McMahon to write a Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
Because this thing is every bit as epic
True.
as any Star Trek movie that's ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got such great character hooks, and Keith already mentioned this, but I mean, what they did for Mariner's character, I mean, this could be the finale to the show if they had got canceled. This would have worked really well because it recontextualizes everything that Mariner's done for the last 4 years. It gives us her backstory, and I think it really smartly ties her backstory in with the original Next Generation Lower Decks episode.
Mhm.
Yes.
Because
Agreed.
it's the death of crewman Sita, and I don't know. I love. I mean, I totally buy that. Her friend died. Her friend who wanted to be a scientist died on a spy mission in Cardassian space.
Right.
And she was like, I don't want to be the person sending these, young, bright kids who want to be scientists and study plants off to fight the Cardassians and die. I just thought it was really well done. And I had said leading up to the episode that I was hoping that mysterious ship would be a new race and we'd get something new. It wasn't. It was something from old Trek again, but it was a pull from old Trek I never would have expected.
No.
Right.
I mean,
No kidding.
really, you feel like Nick Locarno has been overwritten now by Tom Paris,
Yeah.
right? He's got
Right.
his. It'd be like having Armin Shimmerman come back and play that first Ferengi that he played on Next Gen. Like you'd never expect that to happen because he's got a better character now. He's more
Right.
well known for that. But I thought they really handled Nick Locarno well, and the entire 2-parter was just so smart, and I loved the portrayal of Captain Freeman. I've said this over and over on the show, but I like
Yes.
when Captain Freeman is shown to be competent.
Yes.
Right.
She's not the captain of the Enterprise, but she's still the captain of a starship. And too often, I think on the show, they have fallen back on, she'll be petty, or she'll let her emotions get in the way of what's going on, or her pride, or just being incompetent. And they sort of play into that expectation in this episode during her attempts to get into the bar, and like, well, no, we're a roving gang, and they're like, no, you're wearing Starfleet uniforms,
Right?
She's being doofy again, but the whole thing was her plan, and
Yes.
I love that. And she had some real hero moments when they crashed in that battle. That Superstar Destroyer into the force field, and flying the captain's yacht in to save the day. I just thought the entire thing was a success, and I thought it was a really great resolution to what we've seen so far on Lower Decks, but also opening some interesting doors as what's going to happen next. Are we going to see Mariner now on a mission to become a captain? And I thought that would be an incredible flip for her character, but also one that get a lot of comedy out of.
Yes.
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A couple comments that you said real quick, Charles. I'm going to cross the streams like crazy. But in Ron Moore's remake of Battlestar Galactica from a few years ago, the character Starbuck was introduced as being kind of irreverent and always get into fights and stuff. And there's one episode where there's a really crucial battle because they're running out of the fuel, the plutonium or whatever you call it, unobtainium, to let them jump faster than light. And Starbuck has been injured. So she, who is the greatest pilot by far, she has to plan the actual attack and then stand back with Adama and watch the pilots go into battle instead of leading them. And she has to listen as people die. And the whole thing that Adama tells her is it's a lot harder, isn't it, Starbuck, when you just stand back and watch people die instead of being out there. And what you said about with Mariner and Sito and how she doesn't want to be that person, it reminds me of that. It's easy to criticize, and so many times you just want to go out there and go with your fist, but standing back is tough. And I do like that story for her.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I was going to say, you made a really good point about Captain Freeman, because the show itself passed off the concept of second contact as a joke, but it's not a joke. Because if everybody, there's a thing I mentioned a long time ago. There was a podcast I listened to that said in Captain Kirk's original Enterprise, there were no rear view mirrors. Kirk would put some plan in place and leave. We're like, what the hell? What's going to happen with the people of the Apple? What's going to happen with the people of Landru? He left one dude behind for Landru's planet. And you got treaties, food, educating people. It's a huge thing to be second contact, if that's even a term. And I like the fact, like you said, Captain Freeman's a starship captain. And ideally, the worst starship captain who exists is going to be better than most people, because you're still commanding a starship. And it's time they finally showed that in her character.
Right.
Absolutely.
A couple of things since Keith invoked the mighty Starbuck. Two things. One, I think Starbuck is one of the greatest characters ever devised in modern televised science fiction.
Agreed.
Two, that leads us to say that pretty soon we're going to be doing another one of those. What do we call it? Beyond Trek shows where we get to talk about other stuff, and I'm so excited.
Yes,
that's it. All right,
Veronica. Number two is
the ever popular Those Old Scientists.
Yay!
Woohoo! Look at that.
First one to hit 3 on the list, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, we pretty much said all there is. I just had so much fun with this episode, and it was one of the ones that I was looking forward to the most this season, just because I love Lower Decks and love Strange New Worlds, and seeing them there was so awesome. And it's probably one of my most rewatched episodes of all of this past year.
Awesome.
As much as this was like the first bit of information that we got about the second season of Strange New Worlds. And it's almost like they were like, hey, guess what we're doing this year? This is what we're doing this year. And they really kind of trailed it early, even though we never got trailers and stuff for it. They hinted at it so much that I kind of feel like they knew they had a big winner on their hands. I don't think that they, were, they weren't like promoting it in the hopes of people liking it. It's like they knew people we did a really good job on this and people are going to love it.
Yeah.
And we did.
Shockingly, I don't love this episode.
We'll get
those who've been listening
Only
to us
one
for a long-
Keith.
I know. Those who've been listening to us for a long time probably won't be too surprised. I sometimes tend to go for more serious stuff. It's just me personally. But what I did, and Charles and y'all said something very interesting earlier, I thought was amazing. These people, these actors appear in real life as opposed to having been cartoons for all that time. And they work. That's the thing. I like the episode. I don't
They
love
got in some of the
Yes.
standard stuff, like the Boimler butt wiggle and the Boimler
Yes.
walk
Yes.
and the Boimler scream and
Absolutely. They work. And if you did a live action show with them, I wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah,
I
totally.
wouldn't say they're not like it works. They work. They could work. And also, what I saw, and again, because of Lower Decks in this show, I also saw that they could carry a dramatic show if they needed to, a truly dramatic show. And it also showed that they'd done something I don't think they had done. Well, I guess the chemistry, because the way the SNW crew, the Strange New Worlds crew, and the Lower Decks people melded together. You could tell they like each other in real life. You could tell that they gelled together as actors. They just worked, and that's hard to do. Incredibly impressive.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we move on, I want to say that Chuck mentioned before going into this one, when Veronica revealed hers, that this was the first one that's been on 3 lists. We didn't have any single episode that hit all 4 lists.
Wow.
And I think that's really interesting. We did
That's
have a lot
good.
of crossover, but there isn't one that was like unanimously across the board.
Amazing.
So I think that's really interesting.
I think that's really a testament to how the quality of the shows across the board this year.
Mhm.
That
Right on.
there weren't 5 episodes that we all agree are the 5 good ones. You know, like
Yeah.
it's really tough to narrow it down to 5.
Yeah.
Well, that's Star Trek at its best, because if you think about everybody's favorite list of Star Trek, it always includes something incredibly serious, whether it's the Inner Light or In the Pale Moonlight, and it always includes something like The Trouble with Tribbles or a piece of the action or something. And there's this gamut of shows. You're right. There's some that are funny. There's some that are really serious, and I think that shows that Star Trek is hitting on all cylinders right now.
Absolutely.
Right on.
All right.
All right,
Keith,
Mr. Keith.
This was literally the hardest decision of the thing, and this number 1 and 2. Okay, we have talked about so many times. You know what we always say in the original series. If you, Charles, you even said this once. If you do your top 10 in the original series, just come back and it changes in the original
That's right.
series, right? Your number 1 changes. These 2 have changed place, and they could change place while I'm talking. But number 2, well, my top 2.
Well,
number
they
2
can't
is
change
under-
places because I've already made the graphics.
Got it locked in.
This one he has a graphic for.
So you're locked in.
But my number 2 is Under the Cloak of War, and
Yeah, baby.
it just works. As Charles said it earlier, it's a great show. It reminds me of the best of Deep Space Nine. What I love when Star Trek does is when it just gets real and when the character's a little fallible. Now, Charles, you mentioned this back when we discussed this. There's 2 things going on here that I still have trouble with. One is Mabinga basically killing the dude in the transporter buffer. I know he had to do it, but doctors take an oath where they don't kill life, where they don't kill. I still have a problem with that, even though I knew it was under the necessity of war. And then, as you said, the ending's the only thing that kind of puts this at number 2 instead of number 1 for me, because, as you said, it doesn't work. And even though I actually read something that was even more disturbing, the director said originally they were going to kind of straight up have a resolution and they were going to show it. And then they decided to pull back and do the kind of blurry scene where you can't tell if Mabinga struck first or whatever. It kind of doesn't matter, because the fact that your chief surgeon has been carrying around his murder knife for years and then picks it up and he gets pissed off and kills somebody. I agree. That's, I got some issues with that.
Nurse scalpel. No,
Yes.
no, that's my murder knife.
Right. But at the same time, as Alan said, Mabinga was kind of a non-entity the first season. And he was one of those throwback characters where you wonder, were they just doing it because they wanted to bring back a character from the old stuff? But they've made him his own character. His backstory is one of the most fascinating I've ever seen in Star Trek. The doctor who used to be an assassin. That's amazing stuff. Now, if you get real critical, this is no longer the Nurse Chapel I recognized from the original series. That's not a bad thing, but it's not the Nurse Chapel I recognized in the original series. But Jess Bush is killing it. And I have been online a lot, and she is on so many people's favorites list. Her and Melissa Ortega's. They just love those characters. And this show is just, incredibly dramatically deep. And Charles, like you, I keep going back and forth about that ending. Like, that's not a Star Trek ending. But you know what? Neither was In the Pale Moonlight.
Yeah.
Neither was, and I'm not going to spoil it for Matt and Elaine, but neither was Captain Sisko doing his Les Miserables, and that was not a Star Trek ending. I go back and forth, but the fact it's so controversial in my head now is why I like it even more. It's just a phenomenal show.
But you know, this ending goes right back to in Next Generation. I think season 3, Toys, or The Most Toys. Sorry, the one where Data is collected by that guy called the Collector, or whatever he's called. I don't even know.
Right.
And when he comes back, he's transported as his phaser is firing, and you don't know whether his phaser fired on purpose or whether it was an accident, and Data does not say. So either Data lied, and that is also, I mean, whether Data fired the thing or not, Data lying, that's two things that is not supposed to happen in Star Trek. And it's a fascinating ending, and that's kind of what you get here. Is it a Trek ending though? Is it just done for dramatic purposes, or does it work as a Trek storytelling, tool?
I agree. I think and I've heard this, it's like the old famous story, The Lady of the Tiger. I think it's a Rorschach test for you. And I think how you think it ends says something about you. And sometimes where you are, the ending may be something different. That doesn't mean you're a bad person, but again, does Charles
it sounds like what you're saying, Keith.
Yeah. Does Charles kill his coworker or not?
Which one?
Well, I see we have a recurring theme in this episode.
Yeah.
All right. Alan, number 2.
Number 2. What can you say that hasn't already been said? Inner Fight and the 2-part finale of Lower Decks, just an amazing storyline. And everything about it, as Chuck said, this was movie worthy. This was, and you could have done something to expand every part of this episode, like Mariner having her moment with the Klingon that she's fighting, where she sort of has a breakthrough, and she sort of has this revelation about how she's been self-sabotaging. You could have expanded that and made more of it, and it would not have dragged the story down, because it's such an important moment for that character. And part of that, it pays so well because you've had 4 seasons of buildup to that moment, and we've seen in this season the way that she's been basically shooting herself in the foot repeatedly, and on purpose. She just doesn't realize she's doing it or why she's doing it, and that in itself. But then also that it finally made a specific connection back to the original episode called Lower Decks, which is where the whole idea for this show came from. I just assumed that they would not really ever tie it back that specifically, but the fact that and I ask forgiveness that I don't remember the name of the actress who played Sito, but they brought her back for this story. That just blew me away, and got Wesley back in too. It was just a fantastic 2-parter. And every year Lower Decks gets better and better and better. And it started out well. All the stuff that Keith said about how uneven it was, and how it was maybe a little bit hard to get into Mariner's character right away is very, very true. But at the same time, by the end of that season, I was like invested. Every year it has gone farther and it is my favorite modern Trek.
Wow.
Hands down.
Wow. You know what it shows, Alan, what you just said reminds me of something too, is it shows what happens when you actually plot something. Because these people, both Lower Decks, Prodigy, even SNW, they're plotting these stories. They knew coming in that Mariner was going to grow. They knew that Prodigy was going to grow like it was. And that was the thing. They know what's going on, because if they don't write the entire series arc, they definitely write their season arcs. And they have given us great character growth, because they have been building in great character growth, and it absolutely shows on screen.
I just had a thought that I was going to say. I forgot it. Never mind. I know what it was. Keith has now referenced Prodigy twice
Yes.
I just want to say how thankful I am that all of Prodigy got done in 2022, because if we had had a fourth season
Whoa.
that we had to work into this top 5, I would have been
Oh.
sunk. I would not have known what to
Yes.
do, because
Right.
Indeed.
just working on 3 seasons that had 10 episodes each that were of this high quality, it was so hard to pick 5.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to get a few comments before we move on to our number 1s.
Wow. Right on time.
Let's see. We have Matt Sweatman saying they've done The Simpsons, South Park, Beavis and Butthead, even Bob's Burgers as movies. Why not Lower Decks? Why not, indeed?
I agree.
Why not?
I am all about that, Matt Sweatman.
One of those they've even done in live action as well. So
They could do a live action Lower
Yes.
Decks
Yeah.
movie.
they should.
could. They have already proved that that is a possibility.
I
Right.
will show up
Indeed.
for that.
And Matt says also, so did you guys like those old scientists? Right?
You know, the Inner Flight / Old Friends New Planets was on 3 of them as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Matt,
Yeah.
some of
There's-
us liked those old scientists.
Yeah.
Not all.
Yes.
There's another one that's on 3 lists, but
3
it's
out of 4.
in the top spot on 2 of them. So we haven't
Wow.
quite got there yet. All right. Time
All
for
right.
the big number 1s.
So my number 1 episode of 2023 was 17 Seconds,
Dude.
which
Ah.
I thought that was a killer episode, and especially because my expectations going into season 3 of Picard were tempered, because I struggled a bit with the first 2 seasons. I think
Right.
they lost me about halfway through season 2, and I was struggling. And I mean, I was looking forward to, and I said this a lot on the podcast, Worf coming back, because I love Worf. But I mean, I was excited too to see Riker back in doing Starfleet things. You know, he's not making a pizza and then making a cameo at the end of the season. I mean, we legitimately got Riker back in command of a starship.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just old Riker again. I mean, they really accounted for the years and the growth of that character. I mean, Riker's a different person at 67, whatever, than he was at 30.
Yeah.
You know, he's been through a lot in life. And I mean, I think this year, Jonathan Frakes has done his best work on Star Trek that he's
Yeah.
ever done. And that's
Yep.
saying something, because he's been on almost every Star Trek series. He's directed most of the Star Trek series. But I mean, both he directed this episode as well as taking the center seat as Riker. And I mean, I loved the drama with him on the bridge. I love that any like marine battle. And I love the whole cat and mouse with Vadic's ship, and the portal gun was cool. And I loved him having to face something that we've never seen on Star Trek. We've seen portals and other things, but it's a new thing for Star Trek, a new thing for Riker to face. At the same time, while that's going on, Picard's dealing with the fact that he has a son, which admittedly was not a development that I was looking forward to heading into this show. It had been spoiled previously, and I expected that to be coming. Wasn't wild about the idea, but they really sold it, I thought, in this episode. I loved the scenes between Picard and Beverly in the sick bay. I love the scenes between Riker and Picard. I felt like Picard, and this is the 3rd season of the show, but I felt like he felt more like Picard in this episode than he had previously. When they're walking away from, his conversation with Beverly, and, Riker's like, "What happened?" He's like, "It's immaterial."
Yes.
That is something that old school Picard would have said. I loved that. I loved the flip with Picard saying, "Now you can call me number 1," and Riker's, now I'm the captain. But then they turn it on its head, because all of a sudden his old boss starts questioning him on the bridge in front of everybody, and it builds up to this "get off my bridge" moment. And while all that's going on, Worf made an appearance at the end of the previous episode, but this was the first full episode with Worf. It was him teaming up with Raffi. It's old man Samurai Worf, where he's the samurai master, taking this young hot-headed character under his wing. They go on a mission. The humor, all the Worf humor, worked so well in this episode, whereas some of the later episodes, I didn't think it worked as well. I just felt like this episode just knocked it out of the park. I just love these characters. It was so great to see them back.
You have really made me regret not putting it in my top 5. I mean, and I was so close to it.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to go back and rewatch it. I think if I had rewatched it, I would have remembered just how spectacular this episode is.
It's a good one.
And the reason that I almost put it on my list, and you sort of mentioned it. You mentioned everything else that was really great about this episode. This was the best material Gates McFadden had ever gotten on a Star Trek show, and she was phenomenal. And I just think that everything in this episode was so rock solid. Man, now I really wish I had put it in my top 5. But
something else is funny. Charles, you talked about Jonathan Frakes' best acting. I find what was amazing is, as an accomplished director and so forth as he's been, Jonathan Frakes said he was terrified to step in front of the camera for this series because he didn't know if he still had it. He didn't know if he was a good actor. He didn't know if he could recapture Riker. But more importantly, he didn't know if he could give, as you said, a Riker who's in his 60s, not the good-looking kind of sort of Kirk replacement of the young Riker. And he nails it. Absolutely nails it.
Absolutely.
He said that in season 1 when they were when Nepenthe was or whatever that episode was called. I don't even know.
It was.
Because he said, first of all, you've got Patrick Stewart, who is Patrick Stewart. He's one of the greatest actors alive. And then he said, I also had Marina Sirtis, who had just come off of doing like a 3-month run on West End in a big play. And he said her acting chops are just, top form. And here I am, this schlub of a director who's coming in amongst these two guys. And he was worried about upholding, and he did a phenomenal job. And in this season too, I think even more so. I think we need a Riker.
He had better material in the season too, but
Yes.
Right. All right.
Next. Veronica. Number 2. Number one. I forgot.
Number 1, as some people guessed, is Subspace Rhapsody.
Whoop, whoop.
I had forgotten that.
Never have predicted it.
No one guessed, except for several people on our Facebook page.
Tony Bowers got it.
Yep.
Shout out to Tony.
Yes.
This was such a fun episode, and I wish I had known some of the stuff I know about it now when we were talking about it originally, because apparently this was something that Christina Chong had been pushing for, is to get to do a musical episode. And when they told her that they were finally going to get to do a musical episode in season 2, she was so excited. And there were so many theater kids among the Strange New Worlds casts, not only like the well-known ones, but like Christina Chong and Melissa Navia. It was amazing. And I know some people are like, oh, this is just a thing that they're doing because everyone has to do a musical episode. Well, yes, they do, because it's a fantastic episode, and there was character growth, and there was major changes that happened, and things from past episodes, and it affected future episodes, and the songs continued the story. It wasn't like they were just randomly bursting into song for no reason. It was about it was about the science, and it was about, oh, we're feeling this, and it was so much of this feeling that we have to sing. And it wasn't just let's just throw a song in here because which is what, granted, some musical episodes do, but I thought this one was right up there with Once More with Feeling insofar as musical episodes.
Yep.
And it really I was so surprised about Christina Chong and her singing ability, because I did not expect that. And since then, I've gone and listened to some of her singles music, and she's fantastic.
Yes.
She's just a fantastic person, and meeting her and seeing her on social media, wow, she is super an actor, because totally different people, 100%, like 180. It's amazing.
I will say everybody should go to Spotify and look up Christina Chong and listen to her stuff, because she's a great songwriter, a great singer. The songs are fantastic, and especially listen to the great new, I'm going to just go out on a limb and I'm just going to say it's a new Christmas classic, and that is F You for Christmas. It is phenomenal.
Yep.
All right. That's my plug. Keith.
Number one.
Number one pick.
Yeah. And this was one that was kind of obvious, and that is the state motto of Kansas. Ad Astra for Aspera.
Yeah, baby.
Which, being Latin, can be interpreted and read in a billion different ways: to the stars, through difficulty, through. And this is the episode, I guess we could say it's the modern courtroom episode.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about that, Charles already said a lot about it, is for one thing, it's much more realistic because so many Star Trek episodes, the captain or somebody is forced to become the defense lawyer, the whatever. I think actually the last time we actually had an episode where it was actual real lawyers was the original court martial with Captain Kirk. This is a really good episode that gets at the core of what Star Trek means and what the Federation means in universe. This is whole thing. Kirk actually said in the Corbomite maneuver when talking to McCoy about going over to the ship, he said, paraphrasing, this gives us an opportunity to live up to our high-minding words about what we're supposed to be. This episode gives them an opportunity to try to live up to their high-minded concepts. What do you do for someone who's desperate? What do you do for someone who's looking for shelter? What prejudices do we still have that need to be dealt with? Is Star Trek Worlds perfect? It's not, because it's a brave and bold ending because it doesn't solve the problem. It's really like, for those who remember, kind of sort of like Don't Ask, Don't Tell in our real life world in the United States back in the 90s when President Bill Clinton basically put in place a thing, which is if you were homosexual in the military, which at the time was completely frowned upon, he basically said, if you don't tell, we won't ask, which is crap. And we all know that. It was a horrible resolution, maybe the best we could get at the time, but we've gotten beyond that. This episode does not have a really happy ending. One person gets satisfaction from the law, but you know from both what happens in the show and for what we know in the actual series, it's going to be a struggle. They did an incredible job at doing that, and also one of the best guest stars I have seen in Trek history. And I can't believe I didn't look up the actress's name, but man, she just walked in there and owned it.
It is Yetida Bataki.
Thank you. She walked in and owned it. And again, I keep doing this, but hailing back to the original series had some of the best guest stars because they were all Shakespearean actors and Playhouse 90, blah, blah, blah. She just walked in and joined that cast, and she absolutely owned it. She would be my nominee for Best Guest Actress of Star Trek from 2023. Phenomenal show.
Funny you say that, because I do think, when we were watching the shows as they were coming out, I sort of said that she was the MVP of that season. Honestly, I'm going to put her right up there and say she was the MVP of 2023.
Yeah.
And I say that because, yes, that is my number one episode as well.
Wow.
And, and I talked a little bit ago about how I struggled with putting together which 5 was going to make the list and in what order the 5 were going to go. I never had any question in my mind about what was number one. Ad Astra was a phenomenal episode, even though a lot of the time the crew is sitting around watching Star Trek on TV, as Chuck says. I think you get away with that because it's riveting TV. I think that it is written incredibly well. And as we know, when we had one of our special guests on a few weeks ago, that courtroom dramas in television never actually play out the way that they do in real life. Yeah. I don't care, because dramatically speaking, this was a perfect episode. And Yetida Bataki was just, you could not pull yourself away from her anytime she was on screen. She was incredible. And I think that the promise that we had of that storyline that number one was taking from the very beginning of the series, and we got little bits of it over time, played out in this episode so incredibly well. And I just thought it was incredible television. So there was no question in my mind what I was going to put at number. In fact, I started my list with that at number 1. So there you go. Now, as we struggled with these things, well, first of all, let me get some comments before we get into this other thing. Tony Bowers says he nailed it. Yes, you did, my friend. Matt Switman says that he's compositing our top 5s. Well, I've already done that, so I'm gonna put that up in just 1 second. But Matt also says, okay, his top 5 is Ad Astra. Number 2 is Inner Fight and the whole 2-parter. Number 3, Those Old Scientists, tied for 4th place with 17 seconds.
Wow.
And I guess the tie is the fifth place with Under the Cloak of War. So ones that we all chimed in on too. So that just shows you what
I think that
quality...
was his. I thought that was his composite.
That's his
Yes.
composite.
Oh, I see. I got you, buddy.
Jeez,
All right,
man,
cool.
I bet that is composted, so I was really off.
He didn't care
Okay.
for it.
So since we all had ones that we wanted to mention in our top 5, I'm going to say, we all put, well, all except Veronica, listed some of our honorable mentions, and we get some interesting ones there. So, one of mine was 17 Seconds. It was so close to making my list that I had to keep it as an honorable mention, but I also picked Caves from Lower Decks because I loved that episode so much, and it was a great character study for all of our main cast, and it was great to see our main cast together again. But also Strange New Worlds, Among the Lotus Eaters. That one was really close to making my list also. I loved that episode a whole lot. Keith, what are some of your honorable mentions?
I think we had 2.
Quickly.
I had 3 and you had 2 of mine. I had Among the Lotus Eaters, Caves, and In the Cradle of Exelon.
Yeah.
And every one of these both rounded out characters and expanded characters. And one thing I like about Among the Lotus Eaters is Pike sometimes kind of sort of borders on being too perfect, too good looking, too cool, too everything. And this just reminded you again of the Star Trek thing, is what's in us is barbarism. We all have it. And we see how he fights it. Love that episode for that.
Cool. And I was really considering Vexilon also for my list. All right, Keith. I'm sorry, Chuck. I don't know who anybody is anymore.
My honorable mentions were No Win Scenario, Subspace Rhapsody, Caves, Parth Ferengi's Heart Place, and The Last Generation. And Parth Ferengi's Heart Place, I'll say real quickly, I loved the building out of the planet of the Ferenginar, and I loved the return of Ram and Lita. I think it's one of the most effective.
Oh yes, I forgot about talking about that.
Bringing back
Oh my gosh,
old characters that any of the new Star Treks have done.
Yes.
So much
Good
so
point.
that I have disliked Ram becoming Grand Nagus since the 90s. And this episode turned me around. I thought they were fantastic. And I got the chance to tell that to Chase Masterson on Facebook, and she replied and called me Charlie's. So I have a new nickname, Charlie's. Because whatever Chase Masterson calls me is my correct form of address. But also The Last Generation, I think it didn't make my list because I think I have some trouble with the plotting. I think it's just cheesy. In a lot of respect, I think the whole let's get the entire fleet together and network the computers is, for one, unnecessary to the story. If you're also assimilating the crews of those ships, you don't have to also have control of the ships.
Right.
But also Starfleet would hopefully know better than to do that. And it's kind of embarrassing that within 5 minutes of launching their plan, they get hacked by the Borg again.
I agree with that.
It also annoys me anytime that they defeated the Borg with the power of love. I hate when that happens.
Me too.
But I'm mentally bracing myself because Russell T is back on Doctor Who, and that's going to happen inevitably.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
But it was so much fun seeing those characters again all together. And I got the chance to go see them on the big screen, which I never expected to get to do after Nemesis. And I've said before that the first Star Trek movie that I remember seeing on the big screen was Generations. And I have very fond memories of every single one fond-ish memories of every single one on the big screen. But to get all those characters back and to go see them in the movie theater with my Star Trek, Picard popcorn bucket was just so much fun. And that's such a great memory.
It really was.
The joy of it, gets it an honorable mention, even if some of the merits of the episode kept it off of my list. All right, Veronica, what are your honorable mentions?
I didn't have any.
She didn't send. Yeah. So
okay.
I tabulated all of our picks. If something entered a list at number 1, it got 5 points. If something was named in a list at number 1 or number 5, it got 1 point. And then anybody that mentioned something as an honorable mention, I gave each one of those a half point. So here
That's what I was going to say. Yay!
Here is the definitive top 10 episodes of 2023 according to Earth Station Trek. What's super interesting is that I put Moopsie at my number 5 in my top 10. I mean, in my top 5. Caves got mentioned 3 times as and Alt. So it got 3 half points, which makes it the number 10 episode of the year. And one of the ones that was on my top 5 didn't make it onto, which I think is so interesting. I think that's really cool.
I'm gonna read this off for the folks listening on the audio podcast.
Yeah.
So starting from number 1, Ad Astra per Aspera,
13 points.
Inner Fight / Old Friends New Planets,
11 points.
Those Old Scientists,
8 points. My good lucky number.
17 Seconds,
6 points.
Under the Cloak of War,
Also 6 points.
Subspace Rhapsody,
5.5 points, but I add 10 points, so it's 15.5.
Parth Ferengi's Heart Place,
3 points.
17 Seconds,
Also 3 points.
Imposters,
2 points.
Caves,
1.5 points.
and then honorable mentions. I have No Bones, But I Must Flee,
1 point.
Among the Lotus Eaters,
1 point.
and In the Cradle of Vexilon.
Half a point.
And
Nice.
that's a solid collection of episodes right there.
That
folks.
really
I mean,
is.
That's some really
Absolutely.
great Star Trek right there.
Absolutely. I don't like I think Alan said also I didn't dislike any episode last year. I'm not as high on Subspace Rhapsody, but I don't dislike it. And that's the thing. I didn't have one episode I'm like, oh God, I'll never watch that again. So yeah, it's a good list.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got a few months now until Star Trek Discovery comes back. We're also going to have Star Trek Prodigy season 2 this year,
Yeah.
which I'm looking forward to. As much as I enjoyed Star Trek over the past year, I would say that this past year has probably been my favorite overall year of Star Trek TV since the 90s. I think they were
Wow.
doing a great job, but it was all 3 shows were very reference heavy this year. So I'm looking forward to Discovery and Prodigy because they tend to bring in more new stuff, and I'm looking forward to getting some new stuff. And does anyone else have any closing thoughts before we close this out?
I can't wait for Prodigy.
Okay.
Yeah. Great year of Star Trek.
Agreed. Really good year, Star Trek.
Man.
All right, Alan, where can people find more of you on the internet?
Well, how about you go and check out my other podcast, which is called Modern Musicology. We are just about to start our 3rd year, and our 3rd year kicks off with our episode number 100. And we
Yay!
are going to be doing a show where we are interviewed by our listening audience. We asked people to send us questions, and we've got quite a few really, really great questions that I'm going to read out to my co-host, and we're all going to answer them, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And then I also have another podcast called Doctor Who A to Z, Auton to Zygon. And we have just reviewed all of the 60th anniversary episodes and the debut episode of the 15th Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa. So go check those out.
How about you, Keith?
You can find me on X and Instagram and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
How about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
Yep, and the Felt Nerdy and Dirty Show on
Yes.
Facebook. And we're launching February 25th, the biggest show we've ever done, which will be debuting at the Red Light Cafe here in Atlanta. So keep an eye out for that. We'll have tickets on sale for that soon. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. We're really nervous about it. So so we'll come. And where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
And do you have a closing for us this week?
I'm the X.
Hey, perfect.
Ooh.
Join us next week. We'll be going live Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Maybe we'll go ahead and do our Beyond Trek episode that week if everybody's on board with that. We didn't.
Yeah,
plan
sure.
that.
Yeah, that works for me.
I think pull the trigger.
Yep.
You get to hear us talk about something other than Star Trek for a change. We'll talk about some other sci-fi that we love. So that'll be Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can join us on Facebook or on our Facebook group. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
All
Have a
right.
Great 2024.
Bye-bye, y'all. Have a good year. Take care. See you next week.